WTF, everybody's favorite whiskey and food pairing show. Today we've got a hell of an episode for you. I'm really excited about this one. I'm actually food pairing one of my absolute favorite snacks in the entire world, the one and only ever incredible cinnamon roll. So today we're going to discuss a little bit of the history of the cinnamon roll. We're also going to discuss, words are hard sometimes, right? We're going to also discuss a little bit of cinnamon, right? Cinnamon is an ingredient that, permeates its way into every culture. We're going to discuss a little bit of the history, some of the flavor development, of where some of that, that flavor profile starts to generate itself or become represented in single malt Scotch whiskey. And then we're going to make a really delicious and really badass cocktail with some cool Swedish origins. So I hope you stay put. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I'm about to enjoy the ever-loving hell out of this cinnamon roll live on camera for your enjoyment. All right, give me 2 seconds. Let's jump on in, see who we've got in the chat already, and then we'll rock out. All right. As you know, I am a huge fan of all things heavily peated. So our conversation today is going to be surrounding Ardbeg Uigeadail, one of my absolute favorite whiskeys from Ardbeg. I almost said my favorite, but I can't say my favorite because it's difficult. It's difficult to choose one in particular whiskey. I drink them for different reasons. I think the application for Uigeadail for me is when I want something that's going to be a little bit more lipid forward, a little bit more present. Potentially also have a more like viscous and oily mouth presence. Something that's generally a little bit more weighty, kind of like a liquid hug. For me, Ardbeg Uigeadail is just perfect drinking whiskey for especially being outdoors and especially around this time of season, right? When we're starting to think about flavors, that are a little bit more like toasted, a little bit more, kind of have like more roasted elements to them, softer, a little bit more supple, rich, rounded. I think that those are all really great descriptors for how Uigeadail behaves on the palate. All right, let's go ahead and grab a little dram. Then we'll start talking about our cinnamon roll, which is our pairing today. Looks like we've got a comment already. What's going on? What up, Jono? Payne, good to see you, my man. Right, so let's go ahead and get some of this whiskey into our glass. Not quite cast strength whiskey, for 54.2% alcohol by volume. This is still a very large, looming almost whiskey. As soon as it gets into my glass, first off, the coloration of it is stunning. I love the color, this deep, kind of almost copper-esque color. Ardbeg rarely takes a lot of coloration, but Uigeadail is just one that you could stare at this glass for quite some time. Across the first pass, there's a weightiness to this whiskey that I really love. Sherry clearly on the nose. Sherry around this time of year, Christmas time, for me, I start thinking about those baking spices, but also some of those kind of darker, fruitier notes as well. Sherry casks really provide those for me. So the reason that I selected this for Ardbeg Uigeadail for this cinnamon roll is because I think the cinnamon roll is, first off, delicious. I can never be upset when I have a cinnamon roll or three in a day. Same thing goes to be said for Ardbeg. I can never be upset as soon as a dram of Ardbeg graces my glass. The cinnamon roll for me, very much so led by some of those winter spices that we love, right? When I say winter spices, I'm referring often to things like cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, allspice, right? Those things that when you open up a kitchen cabinet, especially like a spice cabinet, you're hit in the face by this just wafting of baking spices. Traditionally around this time of year, we use them for a lot of different baked goods. Snickerdoodles come to mind. I don't know why that was the first cookie that came to mind, but that's a pretty damn good cookie. So yeah, I'll throw that up there as well. Lots of fudges, different brownies as well. Lots of confectionery applications for flavors like that. They also have a place in whiskey. And for me, whenever I do, kind of pull out a glass of Ardbeg Uigeadail especially, I'm hit with a lot of those baking spices that are familiar, right? They're informed by experiences, generally familiar experiences. For me, like my grandmother was an incredible baker. So, like getting to be around my grandmother's house and being even in my mom's house around this time of year reminds me a lot of the fragrances and the aromatics that are active in a glass of Ardbeg Uigeadail. As it, kind of pivots back down towards our cinnamon roll here, in addition to my mom always making cinnamon rolls around this time of year, that was one of my favorite things. I was a fat kid growing up. I was a little chubby kid, so I would often have, 1 to 3 of these. Cinnamon, the history of the cinnamon roll is actually pretty cool. Cinnamon is native, obviously, to South America, but it also was actually primarily, utilized in its primary growing region was actually places like Sri Lanka, some of the coastline in India as well. And it's actually said that as Roman spice traders, tried to colonize different parts of the world, they took spices, they took ingredients from around the world, and they actually introduced those, this wonderful, spice that we now know as cinnamon, which is actually based off of, which is actually, the bark of an evergreen tree. So as they took these spices from Sri Lanka and from the East and introduced them to, people who were baking out in Denmark, out in Sweden as well, hence why we're going to have a Swedish kind of twist on our cocktail today. They began to utilize a lot of these different herbs and spices in traditional, European dishes as well. So the cinnamon roll would have been one of these dishes that was born out of this kind of cross-pollination, I guess, if you will, which is pretty cool, right? Looks like we've got another... Right, Russell says we've even got history on the cinnamon roll. Man, that's what Whisky Thru Food is all about, trying to learn as much as we can. We got great sponges up here. Let's let's try to soak up as much information as we can. Right, so the cinnamon roll, obviously having such a really cool history, I think is a perfect dish for also, incorporating into something like Whisky Thru Food, where we're aiming to kind of dig through another glass of whiskey and find elements of it that are representative of other experiences that we've had in our lives. So everybody should have had a cinnamon roll. This is why I think it was a perfect one. If you haven't had a cinnamon roll, then I just want you to cry cry while you watch me eat this, because I'm going to fully enjoy this. Homemade cinnamon rolls, similar to the Cinnabon recipe. So this will be a little bit kind of fluffy, a little, there will be a density to it as well that I think will pair wonderfully to the whiskey. Let's go ahead and do this, because I've been talking and I'm ready to do the damn thing. I'm going to take an orange peel and I'm actually going to express that over the top of my cinnamon, the same way that I'm going to do for my cocktail. Get that out of here. There we go. And the next bartender on will clean that up. Right, so now that I've got not only those orange essence and oils on my fingers, now I've also got them on the cinnamon roll as well. I think this is going to be absolutely delicious. Let's go ahead and say cheers, slanjava. Let's get through another week. All right. Oxidative note now that it's been sitting for a little while. There's a funk and umami kind of like rancio note to it that I just absolutely love. That's beautiful. Goes very well with the Sono Allegra in the background, our musical selection for the day. Perfect. That's delicious. Great whiskey. Let's go ahead and see how our cinnamon rolls, a la Cinnabon, have held up. All right. That's great. Great texture to it. Icing. Oh. Cream cheese based icing. Also homemade as well. Whew, that's absolutely fantastic. Finally said it. Had to break down and say it. The cinnamon is really well incorporated. The dough is perfect. The dough is absolutely perfect. We had to let it rise for about 35, 45 minutes. Yielded a really great result. Let's make sure we don't get our other orange peel in there, because we're going to use that for our cocktail. The icing, the dough, really great, kind of compare and contrast against each other. Let's see how it pairs with the whiskey. One of my favorite things about Ardbeg is this kind of confectionery sweetness that lays hidden underneath everything else, underneath all of the herbal and herbaceous components. underneath that beautiful smoke, underneath that light kind of fruit that kind of rolls in, there's this sweetness. There's an inherent sweetness to Ardbeg that it's been consistent for me. You know, I've seen it in Arnhem Bashed, which is one of my favorite bottlings that introduced me to Ardbeg, actually. I see it represented in Tenure. I see it in Ugadal, Korjavrekken, and NO. It might manifest itself just slightly different depending on which whiskey we're drinking, but you can always tell it's there. It's that Ardbegian kind of thumbprint underneath the whiskey. I love it when pairing to things like cinnamon rolls and baked goods, because it's always easy for me to pick out. The honey, this is wonderful. Great experience. Right, let's go ahead and take another bite. I'm gonna save this for when I get off the camera and can basically just rub it on my body because it's that good. All right, let's have a cocktail. Whisky Thru Food. We did the whiskey. We did the food. Let's bring those two things together and have a great dram. Cheers and slanjva again. All right, let's do it. Making a wonderful little cocktail today. This little ditty, I kind of created actually because I'm a huge fan of the cinnamon roll. I want to harness not only some of the history, some of the tradition of spice trading, of Swedish, I guess, confectionery, tradition as well. Some of the baking history that Denmark and Sweden both have. And I really wanted to make all of those things kind of come together and use Ardbeg as the vehicle for all of those, wonderful flavors and ideas to kind of be transported upon. Right, so let's go ahead and prep our glassware today. One of my good friends online pointed out, he was like, well, you're not chilling your glasses. I was like, all right, you know what? We're gonna go back to full-on bartending nerd mode, so I'm gonna make sure that we chill our glasses during every service. Right, there we go. We'll just let that do its thing now. So, the base of our cocktail today, obviously going to be Ardbeg, but before we use Ardbeg Ugadal, we're actually gonna be using the two other ingredients. So, one of my favorite Amaros, Amaro Montenegro, sorry. 25% alcohol by volume. We're gonna actually just use about 3/4 of an ounce. Nice light Amaro. Really wonderful, very beautiful. And then we're going to use this absolutely wonderful ingredient as well. My good friend Tommy Stearns, who taught me a lot about bartending, introduced me to Cronin Swedish Punch years ago. I've used it in a lot of whiskey-based cocktails. It's one of my favorite ingredients to utilize. It's just got this kind of je ne sais quoi, just magic touch about it. Swedish Punch has been around since at least the 1730s. It is built on, distillates coming from the East and West Indies. Often rum, kind of essence, like, rum in style distillates. They're also utilizing a lot of different herbs and spices as well that are sourced from around the world. So it's got this hewn leather, honey kind of herbaceous, and there's definitely a cinnamon and like cinnamic acid kind of aspect to it as well. Even in the glass, I can already smell it. And of course, we're going to need bitters, because something spirit, something sweet, something bitter, and a little bit of water. That's the recipe for a cocktail. So we're gonna add about 3 dashes, 4 dashes, math is hard, of Angostura. And then finally, the one and only Ardbeg Ugadal, about 1.5 ounces. Beautiful. Already a great color to it. All right, let's go ahead and add some ice. We will stir for our dilution. Decided to name this cocktail Get Your Roll On, because I'm such a huge fan of the cinnamon roll. And also, get your roll on. Everybody, get your... We're not gonna cuss on this because this is also for work, but, paying some homage there as well. Stirring our cocktail for dilution, of course, because we really want to make sure that all of these ingredients get incorporated, but that we also keep the texture We want a silken kind of texture, very similar to the texture that we actually saw on the icing. All right, let's go ahead and see how we did. Just kidding, I knew how we did. We're great at this, y'all. Awesome cocktail. All right, let's go ahead and finish this. Ooh. Beautiful cocktail. And the same as we actually expressed a little bit of that orange peel over the top of the cinnamon roll, we're gonna do that for our cocktail as well. Great, get those oils on the cocktail, kiss the front of the glass, twist it twice. Nice little presentation. Hopefully that'll stick right there. That looks great. Cinnamon roll still looks great. Whiskey, almost dead, but that's all right. Here we go. Cheers. Slanjava. Let's see how our cocktail is. The orange on the top. The mystery of those spices as well. Rich. Full body, the texture. Beautiful. Beautiful texture. That's a wonderful cocktail. The spices are all communicated flawlessly. The honey kind of aspect of the Swedish punch and of Amaro Montenegro is communicated as well. And then, of course, there's that Ardbeg kind of tying everything back together. Ugadal, nice weighty whiskey that's very warm, just latches on. It's great friends with these two ingredients. Another very simple, easy cocktail to make at home. That's a fantastic cocktail. Let's go ahead and see how it pairs to our food. Our cinnamon roll. All right. Of course, you know how I feel about the cinnamon roll. You saw the tasting earlier. Huge fan of any kind of winter spices like cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, allspice. Cinnamon rolls obviously harness a lot of that cinnamon, and you get a lot of that in whiskey as well, given it's coming from a different method or a different vehicle, which is ultimately the barrel. But you know, it is definitely a wood-based, or I should say, a plant-based tannin. You know, is what is imparting a lot of that flavor profile into our whiskey. But there's a link there. Silky, beautiful texture. Cocktail with a texture to match. Not overly sweet on the cocktail. Beautiful. Great cocktail. Great whiskey. Fantastic cinnamon roll. Incredible episode of Whisky Thru Food. I hope that you tune in to all of these every Monday, every Friday through the end of the year. And then, of course, we will be switching over to Wednesdays. I would like to remind you that we will be going live on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time at the changeover of the year. But until then, of course, Mondays, Fridays, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I am Cameron George, your friend, your heavily peated preacher, and your fan as well. Cheers and Slanjava. I'll see you on Friday.